But cool. Yes, I'm actually excited about this session. I mean, I say that about every session, right? But this one in particular, I think is very triggering, I think. I think I think it's one of those things where it's like we need to know, because it's kind of invading to learn about, the
You don't
investment side
make
of
sense for the
things.
wedding.
And oh, sorry, I think someone's welcoming me. No, it's okay. I
Okay.
think yeah, I think it's a bit in vain to kind of look at investment and practical and budgeting and all that good stuff without actually like tackling one of the biggest challenges that everybody, being completely real, like everybody faces. So yeah, this would be I think it's super dope. PA's already done my job of like making sure people have their cameras on, so thank you for that. But cool. So as PA said, there's a slider. I think if anyone wants to ask any like anonymous questions or like anything, but I'm just much rather I would prefer like people interrupt me, please. And I mean that genuinely, like pause me, cut me off, and be like, "Yo, I want to ask a question." So please do, but also feel free to use the slider that's live and open for you guys to use. But just a quick one on the agenda, as usual. Gonna recap. I guess last week I should have actually asked someone, but I won't put anyone on the spot. Don't worry. But a recap of last week. We'll kind of look into just like the introduction of debt and credit, definitions, why now, why is it important now? Group exercise as we always do. So like if you guys think debt is good or bad, and I'm curious to kind of see how you classify that. What the Bible says about debt and credit, a deep dive into debt. So good debt, bad debt, personal experiences, and then like any practical guardrails that you guys can implement or things that I've implemented. Again, I always want to start off with a candid. This isn't this is what you guys should do, and I'm so good at this. These are lessons that I've learned. Sorry, I was gonna at you, be like, why is my wife's camera not on? So thank you. Um, yeah, more so, this is more so like things that I've learned over like the past few years. So it's not, I don't have it all together. I don't think anyone does. But again, transparency, again, I'm going to try and be as transparent as I can. But again, yeah, please guys, just do chip in because it'll be great to learn from everyone. But so cool. So just diving in, I think the first main part that I mentioned about the recap. So we looked at budgeting, saving, investing. Four key things. So budgeting, we looked at the different types. So like things like zero-based budgeting, the goal saving budgets, all that good stuff. We looked at the emergency funds, why we save for them, what they're used for. We looked at a sinking fund, which is just like pots that you put money into to save for future expenses. And then we looked at Ecclesiastes 11. I think it's the scripture about speaking about. I shouldn't paraphrase this, but if someone could just put it in the chat because I can't remember. But it's about like sowing and not waiting until the all conditions are perfect because you don't know what's going to happen. And then we looked at some principles. So things like compound interest, dollar cost averaging, is just when you invest over time over a certain period. And then we looked at diversification. So like why we have things like ETFs and because they give you a more diversified portfolio. We looked at different asset classes, so stocks, bonds, commodities, and ETFs. And then we looked at like how to get started. So platforms, things like Vanguard, free trade, and then like different account types like ISAs. Also, I don't know if you guys saw the budget today. This is kind of stuff that excites me, but they increased the ISA limit to 25K. Everyone's like, "What's the budget?" I'm like, "Cool." Damn me, I'm sure you know what the budget is. But yeah, so I'm not gonna get into it. But the budget's just like what they do every year to kind of help people, and they change rules and they change legislations. But feel free to check that out. But does that make sense? Recap wise, I think thumbs up, nods, yes, cool, no, perfect, sweet. Cool. So I guess going into the actual session today, I think I mentioned before, right? We've looked at again, guys. You know my animations. I'm not very good at them, so just bear with me, right? But we looked at, I guess, there's kind of like I kind of view debt as like another like side of the same coin. The first side is the investing part, right? Where we looked at where you kind of build your assets up, and you build your wealth and you build your portfolio. But I think at the same time, like I said, it's super important to understand the other side of that same coin, which is the bad debt. And I'll kind of go into why I've put bad debt a bit later on. Um, but ultimately, the difference now, so when you think about your net worth, right? You think your net worth is just the value of, I guess, your value in terms of like monetary amount, right? So your net worth ultimately is your assets minus your liabilities, right? So your assets is pretty much think of it as assets are anything that bring money into your pocket, and liabilities are anything that take money out of your pocket. Another way someone worded it is assets are resources that you own, but liabilities are obligations that you have, right? So assets are things like maybe you have a rental property, maybe you have a P2P car loan, maybe you have, I don't know, some stocks to pay you dividends, right? These are all things that are assets, right? Whereas think about liabilities, they're things like, don't want to rustle any feathers, right? But it's like taking out loans to, buy the next pair of Dior's, or, taking out a loan to just buy things that like don't bring any value to you in terms of money wise. So I think that's the kind of the way you have to think about them. And when you think about debt and credit, right, debt is just the amount that you owe to someone, right? So I can say I owe Jeremy X amount of money, right? Whereas credit is just the means in which you pay for that money. So those are the difference, right? Credit is just the method of paying a debt back, and debt is just the nominal amount that you take, right? Again, guys, if you're following, just give me a heads up or a nod or comment in the chat or whatever. But that's like a very, very like core foundational understanding for why debt is important to understand versus stocks and all the other asset classes that you have. So I think when you think about debt now, there's two main types. There's one that's called a secured loan, and a secured loan is anything that if you take a debt out for this thing, they can take whatever asset that you've taken that debt out for back. So if you think about a mortgage, that's a secured loan, right? Because if you don't pay the mortgage, if you say one day, listen, screw you, bank, I'm not going to pay for it. They'll just take the money back, right? They'll just take the house back, and that's what people call in the US like foreclosure, where they take all the houses back because they can't afford the debt that they pay. If you take out a car finance, really nice car, and you don't pay that car back, oh boy, that car is gone, right? So that's what you call a secured loan. Whereas when you think about unsecured loans, these are things like credit cards and student loan and like medical bills, where it's you don't require the good as security, and how they predominantly measure your credit worthiness is things, right? So they're not going to take back anything I bought with a credit card if I take it out and buy, the new pair of Dior's. They're not going to come to my house and take those Dior's back, because that's not how it works. It's just they use the credit scores to kind of filter out who they want to be in their system and who they want to take credit out for. Now, I guess the main reason why this is like super, super important, and this frustrates me every single time about debt, right, is it's actually everywhere in your face, right? So if you look, guys, like you can't go to JD, like look at this ad, right? It's basically saying get express delivery when you take out debt with Klarna to buy Air Force Ones. Now, the problem with this is I think a lot of older people are more savvy or more understanding when it comes to that. But a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, they see this and it's like, yo, I can get the next pair of AF1s and pay back in 3 months, or I can get the next, Versace jacket and pay back in the next 6 months, right? Like it's the implications that they don't understand about debt, things like APR, things like credit, things like, compound interest that really like does burn them a lot. And guys, this isn't limited to just JD Sports, right? This is Clearpay, like massive now. Monzo now have this like spread in 3 installments, and then like I actually don't like the company Fraser. It's like House of Fraser, Sports Direct. I just don't think I like Mike Ashley, who's the founder. But it's just maybe it's just an urge that I have with him, right? But ultimately, like these are things that are scattered everywhere. Well, I don't know why Twain is laughing, but these things are scattered everywhere, right? Because she knows how much I really don't like that man in terms of how he kind of promotes his companies. But that's another story. Um, and it's crazy because what you see happening now a lot more is the UK is in a point where there is so much debt being taken out, so much personal debt, and people are taking debt out, thinking out in ignorance, right? And it's fun and games when you're taking out debt for £50, £100, £500, but it's not fun when you're taking out debt for 300 grand to buy houses and you don't know how to pay that debt back. Like it's not fun when you maybe have a business opportunity and you want to take out some debt, but you actually don't know how anything works. So I think the point of this session is kind of just to like have a reset and see where we can like upskill, learn a bit more, and all that good stuff. Make sense? Cool, perfect. Oh, cool. So this is really interesting, right? I actually wanted to take it a bit deeper. So there was a study that was done, I think about 20 years ago, about the how people think about debt and how they relate to debt. And it's quite a long study, so I'm only going to read like a part of it. But ultimately, what the study was saying was that there's a pleasure, as you all know, right? Or probably know, but there's a pleasure between um pleasure from consumption, but also there's a psychological pain with parting with cash. So what they were ultimately trying to do in the study was trying to understand people's debt patterns when it came to purchasing goods like cars and like the feelings of enjoyment and satisfaction, right? And ultimately what they were saying, I'm just going to go to the next slide because it's actually very long, but ultimately what they were saying was that credit cards have now been introduced as a way of getting the pleasure of consumption but disassociating the pain of paying, right? So it's almost like you can have your cake and eat it, or so people think, right? But in this study, what actually happened, right, was what they did was they kind of gave people different payment plans, and they predicted that people would rather take out debt where there's a really big down payment at the beginning of like a debt loan versus at the end, right? And ultimately, what they were saying was that people don't care about how long the length of that loan is. All they care about is how big that upfront payment is. And ultimately, the like the findings from that study was that so what it says here is that it demonstrates that with respect to lending, such that with a given monthly payment, that the length of the loan can be stretched out with little to no effect on consumers' willingness to assume the debt burden. And all that means is that credit card companies and debt companies are going to incentivize you in ways that hits that say, hey, pay debt back over 60 months, 70 months, 80 months. They won't use years firstly because that seems too short. They'll use 80 months, 90 months, 100 months, right? And also ultimately what they're saying is that you as a consumer aren't going to care about the length. All you care about is whether I'm going to have a massive down payment at the end of that loan. That's why when you take out a car rental, there's an initial there's an initial agreement. It's at the front because psychology says that you're not going to feel that as much as you would feel it at the end, right? Now, the reason I bring this up is because you have to understand that debt is like a business in itself. Like debt is something that it's almost like a game, right? Like there's a game where you are a player, the debt companies are players, and ultimately the person who wins that game is the person who knows how to use the other player well. Hence why I think it's super important to understand that. Cool. Second reason why it's important to understand it is because debt compounds. Again, we looked at compound interest last week, but it's important to know that it can work against you. So in the same way that if you invest £1,000, you make 10% and you don't take out that money, that 10% keeps growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, where you start to get interest on the interest, right? So where's the example that we had? This example here. Oh, Buzz Susan, I think you're on mute, but it's okay. So so yeah, compound interest. In the case of the investment side, it was where you could invest, don't take out the money, keep reinvesting that, and you make massive returns. In the same way, if you take out debt and you don't pay that debt back, that debt will just keep snowballing and snowballing and snowballing, and it will continue to increase over time. That ultimately you will be paying interest on the interest that you've taken out as debt, right? So if you look at something like this, like a loan repayment calculator, what this says is that someone wanting to take out 50K in debt ultimately over 300 months, which is our maths, Jesus is Lord. 300 months is, someone help me out, please. 12 months in a year is about, okay, yeah, this is a 30-year loan. 25, 26, 27, it doesn't matter. But ultimately, the point being is that if you take the 86,000 as the amount that you repay, and then the 50K that you borrow, that does not look like a 5% interest, because 5% interest would mean that I'm paying back 50,250 pounds. I'm paying back about 50%, 60% interest on the loan that I've taken because there's that compound interest. And this is why I love things like this as a calculator. And don't know if you guys remember in the last session where one of the investments that I said you can actually make is actually paying off a percentage of your mortgage, right? What this calculator shows is that if you take out a 5K loan over 3 years, it tells you the amount you pay if you just paid the amount that that debtor wants you to pay, overall you'll pay 5.6K back without overpayments. But if you pay that back with overpayments, you actually only pay back 4.1K. So you can see the delta is about 1,500, right? Again, point here being like everyone's circumstance is different, 100% fine. But I think if you don't understand why debtors work the way they work and why they encourage you to take out longer terms and why they encourage you to pay the minimum monthly payments and why they encourage you to do all these things, it's very hard for you or for people to break the unfortunate cycle that exists with the really bad debt that people take out nowadays. Cool. And then the last reason is it's important to understand this because of accessibility and credit scores. Now, this credit scores, I don't want to say I hate them, but they're so important that I hate the fact that they're so important. That's that's a better way to put it. Like I really hate how reliant, like you can't take out a SIM only contract for £8 a month without like getting credit, which is just unfortunate. Of course, you can do things like pay as you go, but there's hassle with that. But you can't take out broadband. If you want Virgin Media in your home, you have to take out credit, quote unquote, because you need to be on a plan. You need to pay X amount of money a month. For that, they run a credit score. So technically, you actually need forms of debt, which are forms of credit, hence why you need a good credit score, right? Now, again, I won't go too much into this because I'm sure fundamentally a lot of people know what they are. But ultimately, what I don't think people, and what I didn't realize actually was how credit scores are actually built and how they're actually made. So the first thing is that 35% of anyone's credit score is determined by their payment history, which itself is not true, right? If you've been relatively good at paying back debt, um, it's going to be the biggest factor in the credit score that you get. And ultimately, lenders have one question and one question alone, like, am I going to get my money back? Like, I don't really care about anything else. Is it like, am I going to get the money that I loaned out to this person back? That's fundamentally the biggest category or factor in a credit score. The second thing is the amount of money that you owe, which is interesting. And I didn't realize this was so high. So yes, you might make all your payments on time, but actually, if you are close to your credit limit consistently, your score is going to be poorer than someone else who isn't. Now, put that into practice. Let's say someone has a 5K credit limit and they're consistently spending 50% of that credit limit over time. That person's credit score is going to be worse than, say, if Dami was paying that. Oh, Dami was using 20% of that. Now, people say the sweet spot for how much a maximum amount you should have on your credit card at any one time is 30%. So that means if your credit limit is 5K, don't spend more than 1,500. If it's 10K, don't spend more than 3K at any one time, if that makes sense. Cool. Third thing is the length of history, which is also really interesting. And it's annoying that you need credit to build a credit score, which is kind of frustrating, right? Ultimately, this means that if you haven't got a credit card and you want to take out one, your credit score naturally would probably be a bit lower because there's not a length of history that you have with the credit card company, unfortunately. Second to last is the types of credit. So this is also really interesting. If you have multiple different credit lines, if you have car finance, if you have a mortgage, if you have a personal loan, if you have a credit card, of course, like that's going to have a massive impact. But it's less material, as you can see, like 10% of that is what determines your credit score. And then the last one is any new credit that you've taken. And I felt this the hard way because and so I ain't gonna laugh at me again, but I think when we bought a house, we needed broadband and I needed to change my SIM only contracts because I'm fed up with who was I with? Free, awful network. I was fed up with them. And I wanted to change and I know that if you do like 2 different credit items within 6 months, your credit score just tanks. And I was just like, oh, sorry, I didn't know this. I knew that if you took out credit multiple times, it will go down. I didn't know it was 6 months. So I was like, cool. Took out the Virgin Media because broadband is important. And then it's like, cool, 2 months later down, I want to change my phone contract. Change it. I just see my score tank. But thank God, of course, like I don't need credit for much anymore. But I think again, just like understanding why credit score would fluctuate, changes in that, all that good stuff. Also, I'm seeing the questions. I'll get to them after this section. But yeah, does that make sense? All of the different types of credit. Yeah. Cool. Let me quickly check the question, and then we're going to do the small group exercise. So Emma, you asked. Sorry.
Damola, it was the slide you had with the example on it. I didn't quite understand when you said it. You would, if you pay back early, you would be paying like 4,100, but the loan was 5,000. So I wasn't sure. Are you saying that if you pay back early, you end up not even paying back the entire loan? Or
Sorry, I'm trying to find this slide. Sorry, one
I think
sec.
it was after. It was, yeah, this one, yeah.
Fine. Overpayment for the funds, overpayments. Fine, no, you're right. I think this is just a really bad example. I think you can this probably wouldn't be possible. I think this is just the example that I used with
Oh,
this.
okay.
But ultimately it would be less than what the amount would be without
Yeah, I
overpayments.
got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. So I think really quickly, what we're going to do, as we normally do, is we're going to do a quick small group exercise, which I'll break you guys out into breakout rooms. And ultimately the question is, and this is interesting because I want to hear like a couple people specifically, but question is, what's your view on debt? And is it good, bad? Sorry, is it good? Is it bad? And why do you think it's good or bad?
That has a lot to do with self-control. Like, it really tests your view and your approach about self-control. Like, I remember when I was in uni and I first had my overdraft, I thought like, why is this free money in my account? Like, why is it still saying I've got an available balance? Like, there's nothing in there that I put in there. But it's definitely like, if you see the money, you think that's free money for you to use, the self-control goes out of the window. So it's definitely about your ability to like know that even if you have, can you afford to get it, or do you need to get it? But yeah, other people in my group had juicy views too, so please.
That's so good.
That's so good. I think that's so good because then it also ties into how the system preys on people's ignorance when it comes to how this money thing actually works. So obviously for her first response to be like, it's just like, what's this free money in it? Obviously, clearly they know that the more that they kind of put things out there without understanding, the more likely it is for people to continue to dabble into that rabbit hole. So yeah, so in my group, I said to them that growing up, we didn't talk about debt. Debt wasn't really a conversation, until student loan university. And even then, my dad was like, he started paying for our uni fees, so he didn't even let us even do like I was the maintenance loan because everybody was getting their student loan, whatever, for the first term, buying out. We didn't get to do any of that sort of stuff. So, but then that's the first time I'm like, why? Then we heard about student loan, you pay interest on what you whatever. So, oh, all that sort of stuff. So, but growing up, like my friend said, you owing people money was a big shame as a Nigerian. So you have to have your own money. You don't really we didn't really talk about that at all. So, which I think is a very big negative because I feel that puts us at a back burner to understand how the game of credit actually works in the world, because we end up having to learn it on the job rather than being, educated beforehand and how to use it to our advantage, in my personal opinion. So, all I would tell you, don't take credit card, and that was it. So yeah.
No, that's so true, Hillary and PA, because and it's funny because and just before you guys go, back in the 1950s when like credit became a massive thing, the way they done it was there was a small town in like California. And what they did was they just like posted credit cards to random people. That's now illegal. Like you can't do it. Like I think they banished it like 12 years later. But Bank of America just posted like thousands of credit cards. No one knew how to use it. No one knew what it was. They were just like, "Yo, this is free money," right? So I think nothing's changed. But cool. No, that's good stuff. Anyone else? I know Eniola's group was pretty interesting, but anyone can go, please. I'll give two more people and then we'll move on. Don't be shy now, you guys. We've been here 3 weeks now.
I'll go.
Go for it.
I think our group had quite a few
points in the sense that it's overall, like, we didn't see it was necessarily a good thing, but we can see why it's needed, and it's very much dependent on how it's used. And we also touched on a point that Hilary and PA said about how, like, it's not something that's taught from a young age, or something that, like, you're privy to from young. So for example, like I gave the example of, like, the Santander student account when you go off to uni, and you only open that because we got the free rail card, and then just like that, £1,500 of overdraft. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so Jeremy actually asked a really good question right at the end of the. Yeah, I remember the amount because I went straight to the bank the
I had
day
the same
after
one,
to
sis.
go
Don't
and
worry.
reduce that thing. I was like, there's no way in hell, like, you can't trick me. Do you know what I mean? You just can't trick me. Jeremy asked a really good question at the end of our just right at the end of the session, which was, I think it was something along the lines of, like, has your own personal view or your own personal experience with debt tainted how it could possibly be used in the future for you, or something along those lines. Jeremy, I think you might be a bit better to answer that question, but it was a really good question. Yeah, one to think about for sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really good question. Food for thought, guys. Cool. Anyone else? No pressure. I'll just go. Proceed if no one wants to go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, I think I was in Eniola group. So I think in our group we basically said our perspective on debt is it's not a bad thing. It just depends on your management skills. How you manage debt would determine, whether you're at the end of it, or whether you're in more debt, or you actually, you were able to pay off your debt and you had credit, because I think, yeah, basically my own understanding of debt, similar to PA, was dad said don't take debt. Like, don't accrue debt, like, no, credit cards, nothing like that. Uni, father paid for everything. So yeah, like, yeah, he was adamant. He was passionate about that, so but yeah, that's basically what we said in our group.
Yo, that's a wise man. Because when I'm in that HMRC, yeah, and I see that 50K, I'm like, yo, but it is well. No, man, these are all really dope points. I think, yeah, you guys have hit some, like, pertinent nails on the head. But we're gonna, yeah, we'll jump into a lot of that. But yeah, I think it was a good discussion. I think, so that everyone can share and learn and kind of, like, share their own takeaways, but also just to kind of see where everyone's at. Like I always do, like, we don't know where to get to if we don't know where we are ultimately. So I think point of that was just to kind of, like, let everyone have, like, some personal reflection. But that's dope. Cool. Onto the juicy part, right? It's like what the Bible says, because ultimately, right, like, all of this is great, but there's still a standard, right? And I think there's always a benchmark that we can, as Christians, that we kind of, like, level ourselves against, right? And this is ultimately, again, everything that we do is going to be, like, scripturally sound, right? So I think one thing that the Bible is super clear about is, and that's without a shadow of a doubt, right, is the dangers of debt. Fundamentally, if you look at Proverbs, even if you look at Romans, right, like, Bible here says it says, owe nothing to anyone except for your obligation to love one another. If you love your neighbor, you will fulfill the requirements of God's law. But again, the premise of that, of course, is around the loving your neighbor, but the part at the front is about, like, do not be indebted to anyone. And there's another translation that says, like, I think it says something about, like, don't have debt and don't pay it back. But ultimately, if you have debt, make sure that you've paid that back. But fundamentally, the Bible speaks about, like, not owing anything to anyone, right? Go back to the Old Testament in the book of Deuteronomy. It says, the Lord your God will bless you as he has promised. You will lend to many nations, but you will never need to borrow. You will rule many nations, but they will not rule over you. Again, there's a premise here around there's a blessing that the Lord is giving to people, and the blessing is that you can lend, but you will never need to borrow. So if the Bible says that there's a blessing behind lending and not borrowing, there must be a danger that the Bible sees that a lot of people don't about the thing that everyone so loves, which is debt, right? And again, the reason why I want to put these kind of scriptures is because there are things that are so clear that don't need explanation, right? There's no context. You have to go and look and see the principles there. You will lend to many nations and you will not need to borrow. You will rule many nations, but they will not rule you, right? But even if you go a bit deeper into that, and you look at why the Bible is so, I don't want to say so against it, but why the Bible is cautious and cautiously telling us about the dangers of debt, it's because of what it produces, right? It's not necessarily the debt itself, it's what the debt produces. If you look at Proverbs 22:7, it says, the rich rules over the poor and the borrower is a slave to the lender. I'm sure many people have seen this, right? So what does this mean? This means that when you take out debt, you're ultimately now, you're a servant of that leader. You now have to do what's in the best interest of that lender. Like if I don't want to pay my mortgage back, there isn't an option. I have to pay that mortgage back, right? Because I'm almost at the interest of the lender. Like some could say you're even bound to the lender. Like you don't even have to, like, let's be spiritual, right? Like you are bound to that lender. To be a slave means that you are bound to that someone. You are shackled to that thing, right? And ultimately you no longer, and again, there's context behind this, right? But you no longer, when you have debt, have the free will to make the choices that you want to make, ultimately, right? Because again, I can say, hey, I want to take a trip and I want to go to Jamaica and I can use that mortgage money, but actually, no, I have to give that mortgage money away to the person who I borrowed it from, right? And you even see, like in the book of Nehemiah, I think I have the scripture here. In the book of Nehemiah 5, right? I'll go to it next slide. But we see when the Israelites take out debt, they use words like we need to do this and we can't do this and we must do this and we are helpless, right? There's all these words that symbolize bondage and symbolize like some sort of shackle to the lender, right? Let's even go there, right? Nehemiah 5:1 to Nehemiah 5 verse 1 to verse 5, it says, now there was a great outcry of the poorer people and their wives against their Jewish brothers to whom they were deeply in debt. For there were some who were saying, we, along with our sons and our daughters, are many. Therefore, allow us to get grain so that we may eat and survive. There were others who were saying, we are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses to buy grain because of the famine. Again, ultimately, Nehemiah, again, I don't want to go too much in the context, but I think Nehemiah has just got back to Jerusalem after like the king allowed him to come back, right? And he's got this vision that the Lord's given him, but what he sees when he gets back to Jerusalem is absolute carnage, right? Like people are in so much debt. The people they call brothers are charging crazy interest to the other brothers. People are poor. They're selling their sons and their daughters. And ultimately, this is kind of like one of the earlier stages that we see debt used in the Bible. But even if you think about why that's the case, right? Let's go back to this scripture. Sorry, my thing's messing up. Yeah. So this scripture, right? Oh, I butchered it. Okay, cool. No, this was verse 1 to 3. Verse 4 to 5 says, there were also others who were saying, we have borrowed money on our fields and vineyards for the Persian king's heavy tax. Now our flesh, so our skin, is the same as that of our brothers, so our relatives, and our children are like their children. Yet here we are selling our sons and our daughters to be slaves. And some of our daughters are forced into bondage, and we are powerless to redeem them because our fields and vineyards belong to them. And even if we didn't even go much on what, like not even to get too spiritual, right? You can look at the last sentence and be like, this is why there is an encouragement against debt, right? Bad debt anyway. It says we are powerless to redeem them because our fields and vineyards belong to others. If you step back and look at debt from a position of power, someone who's not in debt, even like whether it's good debt or bad debt, right? Or quote unquote good debt or bad debt, regardless of what type of debt it is, once you take out debt, you in a sense lose power over your autonomy, right? And this is what the Israelites faced, right? They said we are powerless to redeem their sons and their daughters who they sold into slavery, right? Why? Because their fields belong to others. So I think even using, like, sometimes we can look at debt so practically, but actually not look at where debt came from, but also not look at the impacts of people being in debt, especially back in those times of the Israelites and when they were, in the state that they were in, right? Now, I guess there's a question, does that mean that we shouldn't be in debt? Because let's be real, guys, the reality is a lot of people, majority of people have debt. I have debt, right? And the question is, does it mean that we shouldn't be in debt? Now, I guess my answer, and again, this is what I've said. Ideally, I think that utopian state, which is the perfect world, I don't think that we should be in debt. Of course not, right? But I don't think debt is forbidden. The only thing I would say is that if we do find ourselves in debt, fundamentally, like, we have to be wise, right? My debt was paid on the cross. Emmanuel, I'm always preaching, man. I gotta hear it. But no. Emmanuel, you're funny, man. But yeah, like, if we do find ourselves right, like there's a posture where I think the Bible speaks about the people of this world being shrewder than the children of God. And there's a point to why it says that, right? Because I think Christians sometimes like, no, let me not learn about that. God is provider, which he is. God is provider, right? But it doesn't mean you're ignorant, right? Now, I think the problem and the fundamental problem, and that's why I love Josh when I jumped into his chat. Oh, snap. Sorry, guys. I hit my remote and now it's gone off. Cool. Sorry. Yeah, so the fundamental problem, which even Josh was explaining in the chat, is the Bible doesn't forbid debt. The Bible forbids charging excessive interest to brothers and sisters, especially brothers in the faith, right? You look at 2 verses later, the Bible says, this is Nehemiah saying, he says, after thinking it over, I spoke out against these nobles and officials, those who were charging stupidly high rent, high interest. And he said, I told them, you are hurting your own relatives by charging interest when they borrow money. Now, Nehemiah didn't say you are hurting them when they borrow money. It didn't say that. It says you are hurting them when you charge interest when they borrow money. Then I called a public meeting to deal with the problem, which means that the problem isn't actually debt. Back then, the problem was that my brother, let's say Moffat, I wanted to borrow money, and he said, okay, cool, take £1,000, but I want 1,200 by next year. It's like, how wicked can somebody be, right? That's ultimately what they were doing, right? Now, what this tells me, number one, is that debt isn't the issue. And the problem and the things that they were honing on was that in those days, what they would do is something called a usury. And usury, I think if you guys studied history or whatever, usury is the practice of charging excessive interest rates, which it wasn't even done in the Bible as well. It was also done in the UK, which is why they abolished it hundreds of years ago, right? So it's less to do with the debtors and more to do with the creditors, right? That's why the Bible says in Psalm 37, the wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. It doesn't say the wicked borrow. It says the wicked borrows and does not repay, right? So I think that there almost has to be like a shift to, this doesn't mean now everybody should take out debt. I'm not saying that for a second. What I'm saying is that if debt is taken out, it's not the actual act of taking the debt out, in my opinion, which is bad. It's more so to the creditors, if that's making sense. And if we do this, we have to be wise about it. Question is, how do we know this, right? We see it here, Deuteronomy 23:19. Do not charge interest on the loans you make. It's very simple. I'm not even going to hone on it. Whether you loan money or food. So don't come and say, oh, I gave you food yesterday. Come and give me food today. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Exodus 22 says, if you lend money to any of my people who are in need, do not charge interest as a money lender would. Same principle here. Third scripture, without a shadow of a doubt. Those who lend money without charging interest and who cannot be bribed to lie about the innocent, such people will stand firm forever. guys, like it's so and this for me is where the clarity, because we were having a conversation, I think like a couple of months ago about, oh, is that bad? Is that not bad? And I was like, listen, like I actually think it's the act of taking out debt, not paying it back, and the interest that the creditors charge, which is the problem. Are you guys following? Because I know I said a lot there, but just let me know. Nod.
We're following. We're having that conversation in the chat.
I'm seeing. I think the whole financial system. Oh, 100%. The entire system is built on debt. Like so much to the point where banks can loan money to people that they don't have. Like banks have a thing called a what is it? I think it's called like a income reserve ratio, which all it says is that for a bank to loan out a certain amount of money, all they need in the bank's account is 10%. So if I wanted to borrow 100 million, the bank just needs to have 10 million in their bank portfolio to loan out 100 million ultimately, right? Like the whole system is built on debt. The whole system, the entire system is built on debt, right? Financial crisis, Hillary, you're starting to ginger me because I love this stuff. Financial crisis, yes, it was built on basically saying, hey, we're going to give so many loans out to people, and we're going to give these loans out to people ignorantly. Yes, we don't have the money, but we think we're going to get the money back. So we're going to give so many of these loans out. What happened was that people weren't paying their loans back. Big Short, fantastic. People weren't paying their loans back. Everyone defaulted, banks defaulted, people got fired, scandals, prison, all that stuff. And that's how ultimately the financial crisis happened. But yeah, the whole system, and this is why we need to understand it, guys. I can't even lie to you. It's a deep topic, y'all. But fundamentally, this is what the Bible says. The second key takeaway. So first one is that it's not actually the issue of debt. The second key takeaway is that the reason for why you take out debt matters. Like guys, if you're taking out debt on garbage, and I'm going to be so candid here, like there's a problem, right? Like even if you look at the Nehemiah scripture, it says that they were taking out debt to feed their families. Oh, hey, Muffet, Money Explained. Hey, you started me here, bro. I actually got that as a plug at the end, but Money Explained is fantastic. But yeah, people were taking out debt to pay for food, to survive. Like it's not because they wanted a nice outfit or because they wanted the latest, fanciest car. Like it's not because of that. Like they were taking out debt to survive. Right, which is why I personally don't have a problem taking out debt to buy certain things. For example, like a home, right? If it's okay, cool, the future asset value that you'll gain, fine. If you potentially take out debt because there's an opportunity that you know that there's a play that you can make, use other people's money, all that good stuff. Like there's a way that you go about taking out debt, which is super wise. If you have that conviction and if you've done your research, then I think by all means. Cool. Yo, I can't keep up with you guys, man. This is I think my wife's dropping some things on wisdom. I see love hearts, but I'm not gonna shout out too much. If I can put 10% out of my I think I could see impossible to say. Yeah, toss. Basically, yeah, I think that's a really good point. So the banks need us to pay so they can pay back their own loans. Yes, exactly. Like the banks need, and this is the problem in 08. People, what the banks were doing is they were taking out debt and giving mortgages out, and they were selling that debt to other people. So they couldn't fulfill their loans because the people like you and I weren't paying their mortgage back. So ultimately, it was an awful system. It was, guys, watch Inside Job. I'm gonna plug it. Inside Job is a fantastic movie. So I'm gonna laugh, but Inside Job is phenomenal. But cool, guys. I don't want to get caught up because this is yeah, the chat is popping off. So does that make sense so far, everyone? Give me a shout because I'm gonna finish in about 10 minutes and you guys can ask away.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Cool. Fantastic. So last couple of sections is like, I guess, a deep dive. Now, these are two famous men, very, very famous men. One, some people might like, one some people might not like. But the guy on the left is the famous Dave Ramsey, the Christian finance advisor, who is very, very left wing. He does not like debt. absolutely hates debt, right? And he said something, right? He said, and unlike what the toxic money culture wants you to believe, you don't need a credit score to rent an apartment or buy a house. So if you don't need a credit score because you've never taken out debt, keep it that way. If you do have a credit score, get rid of it, cut up your credit cards, pay off all your existing debt, and stay debt free. This is what Dave Ramsey said. He's very, and again, I'm not going to say where I sit because that's not my point here, right? Whereas Robert Kiyosaki, famous guy, founder of Rich Dad Poor Dad, he has about 1.2 billion in debt. He has an insane amount of debt, insane, right? But he is incredibly wealthy. His net worth is like, and he is built such a successful portfolio based on using other people's money, right? I know Jeremy's in his spirit. I know he's ginger using other people's money, but like he has built his fortune on using other people's money, and he is phenomenally pro debt. Right now, the point being is, I think number one, you have to do research. Number two, you have to see your own convictions. Number three, you have to see where you guys are at in terms of like what you know you're able to take. Like you have to be wise guys. Like like yes, 1.2 billion in debt is a lot of money, but he's done a phenomenal job in terms of like what he's been able to achieve. Dave Ramsey's net worth, which has surprised me, I think he has about 200 million or something insanely high. I didn't know that. He's done that using no debt. Point being is it's all dependent on the type of person you are and being very, very, very guided. Like, please, just I can just beg you, please. All right. So where this taking all of this, taking what the Bible says, taking my own personal experience, taking the debt that I had, this now landed me on this kind of view for debt for me, right? Bad debt is any debt for me, this is personal, guys, please don't go and say I said that. But bad debt for me is taking out debt, any kind of debt to purchase a liability. And again, this might be like, it's a bit harsh, but a liability being anything that you have an obligation to pay something on, or something that just continuously leaks money out of your account. Like taking debt to pay that back, I think is a form of bad debt personally. Whereas now you'll notice I haven't put good debt. I've put not as bad debt, right? Now the reason I put not as bad debt is because good implies that everyone should do it, which I don't think everyone should take out debt. So I haven't put good, because anything that's good you would do, right? So I put not as bad debt. And what I think this is any debt that you use to grow things like your net worth, things like your earning capacity, things like long-term equity, things like increased cash flow, things like taking out debt to almost reduce your liabilities in the long run, right? Like is a form of not as bad debt, quote unquote, right? Like you look at my company that I work at, they took out this is public, guys, so don't worry, I'm not sharing anything I'm not meant to, but I think last year or whenever it was, they took out about 400 million worth of debt, right? To build the company. Now the company is massive and they're doing a lot of really good things, right? Again, that's a type of not as bad debt because they use that to scale their business. They use that to grow their customers. They use that to reduce their like overheads and costs and all that good stuff, right? So again, define your definition of bad debt and not as bad debt and run with it. Ultimately, is my advice to you guys. Like, guys, I love my Amex. I have an Amex and I use my Amex almost every day. I love my Amex is fantastic. It's fantastic, right? And it's fantastic because it works for me, right? But again, that doesn't mean that everyone should get a credit card, but I do. Big up Amex people there. I didn't even think it's anyway. But listen, Toss, if I tell you, if I tell you the hacks from Amex share, you people will be surprised. But yeah, I use my Amex for everyday spending. Like it got to the point where I was like, okay, cool. Like I actually need to stop like using my Amex for TFL because this is like I'm just gonna forget like to pay all this money back, right? But Amex, hey Jeremy, get out of here, man. If you like, guys, there are things, right? And okay, cool. I wasn't gonna go here, but guys, there's a web. Oh no, let me not go there. Let me not go there. But yeah, I use my Amex for everyday spending, right? Because ultimately, what happens is I'm getting so distracted by this chat. I might close it actually. I think I'm going to close it. You can build points. You
You
can
want
use.
to know now, you know. You can't be saying that stuff and not share it, you know.
Say that again.
You want to know. You can't be saying something not sharing it, you know.
No, because it's a rabbit hole. I just don't want to. But maybe at the end. But yeah. So in the documentary, right, that Moffat mentioned called Money Explained, what credit card companies do is they categorize you into three sections. You're either you're a transactor, you're a revolver, or you're a no card person. No card is very simple. You don't have a credit card. To be fair, I have the slide here. Let me go to the slide. Let me go to the slide. Yeah. So you think you're either a transactor, you have no card, or you're a revolver. And I think fundamentally, this is the first place to understand. Like, to avoid taking bad debt, you need to understand how debt works. And I fundamentally, please, guys, watch this. If I can give homework, watch this episode because it's 20 minutes. Fantastic. And what credit card companies do is they group you into one of these: transactors, no card, or revolver. No card means that you ain't got a credit card, which is a good place to be because you don't lose money and they don't make money off you. Transactor, it's funny because people call transactors deadbeat customers. Deep what I said. A transacting customer is a deadbeat customer. And all a transactor is, it's someone who pays back their bill every single time, on time, every single month. That's a deadbeat customer. Think the words that I'm saying, guys. You're paying your bill back on time and you're a deadbeat customer, right? And you're deadbeat because they ain't making no money from you, right? Whereas a revolver, if you're a revolver, it's someone, it's even too short, right? But you're someone who doesn't pay back your debt, and you what's the word? You're just paying the minimum monthlies and you're racking up interest. You're racking up interest. Like they love you. They love you as a customer. You are racking up interest for them, right? And ultimately they will do things that, oh, get 6 AVRs, or oh, get Sainsbury's cashback, or oh, do this because they want to keep you as a revolver, keep paying that minimum monthly. But it's like, guys, if we have a credit card, we need to be a transactor. We need to pay our bills on time, right? And then last things really quickly, because I feel like you people are having questions in the chat about finance, and I want to jump in. But second thing is, if you do have a credit card, right, guys, fundamentally, just if you know you're not going to pay your bill on time, don't take out the credit card. It's just simple as, like, just don't do it. Just don't do it. If you do have a credit card, don't take out more than the industry standard is 30%. Don't use more than 15%, is my opinion. It's just my opinion. Know your interest. If you do unfortunately have to pay interest, know how much they're going to charge you fundamentally. And then just check on your financial statements, monthly statements. Like, I remember there's a time, I think we had like a Spotify subscription come out from my A-mates, and I was like, what? I think one of us forgot about it, and I was like, God forbid, this not you and I that's going to start this rubbish. And there are like simple things, right? Like, so we have a standing order from our debit card to our Amex every single month. Come rain or shine, that thing's getting paid because there's a direct debit, right? So whether I know about it or not, I'll keep money in my current account so that when the bill comes, if it is anything unexpected, it's going to come out. Don't make purchases if you don't have the physical cash. So there's a rule that I live by, guys, and I think it's on the next slide. Yeah, there's a rule that I live by, and when I make a purchase, I think about if I lost the thing, and this is relative. This doesn't apply to a house either because that's different. But generally, if losing the good would create a severe financial implication, I try not to buy the good. So if there's a nice watch that I want to buy, or someone wants to buy, and it's X amount of money, and it's like, if you lost this thing and you couldn't get it back, would it impact your financial position? If it would, there's a problem, right? Some people use it if you can't buy it 2 or 3 times, fine. But this one for me is better because this even extends to a car for me personally, right? Like if I bought a car, and because cars get written off, cars get scraps, things happen, right? If I crashed the car and the insurance guy said I can't pay you out, it's like, oh boy, finished, right? But I think these are a couple of the guardrails that I use to kind of like manage the purchases that I made. I genuinely won't buy anything that I don't have the physical cash for, fundamentally. But being very transparent, when we bought the house, we needed to get some work done, and we knew we needed to get it done. We didn't know how soon we needed to get the work done. I said, oh boy. I said, guys, it wasn't easy. So being transparent, we took out debt to fund it, but we were in a position to pay the debt back within like very, very short amount of time, ultimately, like maybe a month or so, or a few, or for a few weeks. But I think this is the point, like it's not necessarily bad. Like we could have paid for it by taking money out from our ISA, but then we sacrificed the tax gains that we get from that. So it's like we took out debt, made a calculated decision, and then we paid that back ultimately, right? But again, there is a lot of wisdom in knowing how to manage that. But I'm gonna stop talking, y'all, because you guys are chat, man, and I feel left out. But I hope fundamentally, like, I think it might be nice to kind of open the floor, I guess, like for like discussions or any questions or things that you guys are thinking about. I even see you guys being transparent. Toss, appreciate you, Bim, you guys. Like, so yeah, anyone that wants to chat, share their thoughts, any questions, please go for it.
Can I go first?
Yeah, go.
I guess it's more of like, could you more so a topic you can speak to in regards to cars, because I know we've been speaking about it in the chat. When it comes to car finance, we've had conversations about car finance. We have it often, and I am against it completely. Like Damola's always like, "Babe, what do you think about a new car?" And I'm not trying to hear it unless we're paying cash. Like, no, I'm sorry, guys. Obviously, sorry.
Wow.
By the way, sorry, let me just say these are not Damola's views. This is his wife. I am against car financing as a whole, but from a better, well-rounded perspective, what are your thoughts? And then also, what are your thoughts in relating to what is a decent car, how you make decisions? Over to you.
Can we find out why you're against it completely? You said you're completely against it. All I heard is.
Okay, so I think it's back to what I said in terms of how you make your decision buying your car. So I think sometimes when people make a decision, you can talk yourself into making a decision. I've done it myself. So you'll say, okay, cool, this is going to be reliable because it's brand new. This car is less likely to have any issues. Like you start to stack up all of these things that allow it to make sense for you. But if someone were to give you, I guess, a car that wasn't as quote unquote nice, but still fit all of the categories, you're not really going to take that option. So I think sometimes people, as a whole, I just think, okay, no, let me start again.
So then is the car a liability or asset then?
No, let me start again. I'm going to rewind it. Firstly, the car needs to fix. I think that's my issue with car financing, especially for newer cars. In the first 5 years, you lose 70% of the value of the car. To me, that sounds like I'm setting money on fire. And I cannot, that's just me personally, I cannot join. I can't do it. But then also, I think when it comes to making decisions with cars and financing it, I don't think we're thinking as logically and as wise as we can be, because we know we have options. Because it's like, okay, cool, that's a £50 a month difference, £100 a month difference, as opposed to like, okay, cool. If you really want to think about what you can afford and what is reliable, you're not going to go for the options you go for. And for me, I'd rather be hard on myself and be like, okay, cool. Yeah, I can afford a brand new Audi and I can pay it monthly, but also it's better for me to get a Toyota Yaris that's a 2015 plate, and that's a cheaper finance, but it'll probably just be as reliable. That's just me. But anyway, Damola, over to you.
Do you know what? I think it's an interesting point. Now, I'm not anti-car finance by any means. Now, and it's fine for us for everyone to be different. Now, I'm not anti it for two reasons. Number one, I think someone made a good point about how okay, cool. No, let me go to number one. I think what I'm against is the way some finances are done. And if I was to finance, for example, finance is good for me, an ideal position. If I wanted to free up some cash flow, if I had the money to buy the car, I didn't want to like rid my position of the flexible liquid cash that I had. What I would do, for example, was do a part cash, part finance car, right? Now, the reason I do that is so that when investment opportunities do come up, I have liquid cash readily available to invest in certain things, right? For example, I don't know, if whatever, hypothetically, an interest rate is 20% one day. If I had a car, I can't sell that car immediately and put my money in the bank. If I part finance, part cash it, I could sell, I could still use the cash that I haven't invested in the car and put it towards another investment opportunity. But that's just like one example, right? I think the second example is let's be honest, guys. Like, we want nice things in life. Let's just be real. We want nice things. I want a nice car, right? Now, that's not an excuse for buying a car with money that you don't have. But what I do think it does is it gives you, there are different ways to finance. You can finance a 5-year-old car, you can finance a 7-year-old car. But there are ways that you can do it that are a lot smarter. For example, instead of going to the finance company who will give you a 10% loan, I would go to Sainsbury's Bank and take out a personal cash loan of £10,000 at a 5% interest rate and use that to buy a car outright. A lot of people don't know that because the finance company seems like the best option, but actually, oh, thank you, Tosan. I appreciate you, man. Yeah, I mean, guys, we work hard. I don't like that work hard. But I'm gonna stop. Nike, I hope I said your name right, please. I think it is Nike.
I'm gonna respond to Tony Senior, but not Nike.
Sorry, what do you say?
No, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was saying go for it.
Oh, right. No, I was just going to say that I think obviously we're in the UK, right, where we have access to credit and we have access to or debt, so on and so forth. And so we have the privilege of looking at it like, oh, should I take out car finance? Should I do this? Should I do that? But for me, I feel like because I've been in societies like Nigeria, for example, where you don't have access to debt and you don't have access to credit, then you can value it in a different way. So if, for example, you're in Nigeria and you need to buy a car, you have to buy the car outright. And when you do that, you tie up all your capital into one purchase. And then there's so many opportunity costs that you miss out on, or there's so many opportunities that you miss out on because you spent the equivalent of £20,000 on a car when you could have really, you could have financed it and paid, I don't know, £1,000 a month and then invested the other 15K and then made money from that. So I don't think that my personal thing is, I don't think that debt is all bad. I think it has its uses. And if you understand the numbers, which can be a bit tricky sometimes, because even if you, for example, if you have debt with low interest rates and inflation is sky high, then it actually makes sense to have debt. So I think it does depend on who you are and like what stage in life you're at, or like what interest rates you have and what you're trying to purchase. But I don't think to call something, I don't think it should be absolutes, basically. I think that a credit system in itself is a sign of an advanced society, and it kind of levels the playing field between the rich and the poor. And with societies that you don't have that, your ability to climb is reduced.
No, that's such a good. Those are such good points. Such good points. Yeah, that's really good. That's yeah, you said it. Honestly,
we've got Davy and Bim next, so you can go. Very good points, Nick.
Yeah, no, very good, Nico. Very good question. I'm like, if you can go into your thoughts on debt consolidation, and I guess for those who are already maybe might have debt in different places, what your views are on consolidating that debt, and I guess kind of like the steps for that process.
no, I think it's a good point, bro. I think, yeah, again, this is a favorite of Dave Ramsey, consolidating your debt. Honestly, I think it makes sense. And the reason I think it makes sense is, so when you get a credit card, you can do things called balance transfers. And balance transfers allow you to move your debt from one place to another place. And why I think balance transfers are really good is because you can move your debt from a very high interest card, like an Halifax card, to one that they're giving you 0%, 1%, 2%. So if you put that all in one place, ultimately you can benefit other cards, low interest rate. So yeah, no, I think it's a good idea for a lot of people. But again, I think it's just dependent on rates that people have, terms and conditions, and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to contribute to the car financing discussion. And I think I'd just say, like, caveat, everyone should do everything within their means. Cut your coat according to your size. When it comes to the issues of cars, you're not buying, it's not an asset, right? Whether you buy it outright, whether you take it out on finance, it's not an asset. So there is a level of acceptance of it is going to depreciate in value. So I think the question then becomes, okay, what can I afford? And if it's something that you can't afford on a monthly basis, taking out car finance, then okay, do save up your money, buy a car outright. If it's something that you can afford and take out car on finance, then you can work it that way. And there's also benefits in terms of like the warranties, the servicing deals available. So to me, it kind of gives you peace of mind over time that you're not going to be spending as much on a car that breaks down that you would have purchased outright that is older and has more mileage on it. So I think I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, which is what I'm trying to say. But I think it all boils down to what can you do? What can you afford? And don't try to keep up with the Joneses by getting out a new car. Is it within your means? If it is, go for it. If it's not, don't go for it. That's what I wanted to say.
No, I think I fundamentally agree. There's a value that you place on peace of mind. And I think as you get older, you value that peace of mind a lot more. Be real, guys. Yes, a older car is cheaper. It's probably going to mean that you don't take out loans or whatever, but boy, it's stressful, man. I'm telling you, I had a car that was a dud, that was a lemon. They call it a lemon, right? It was a lemon. And I think I 100% agree. I don't think there's a right or wrong. Again, I'm not anti car finance. I do think I'm pro peace of mind. I'm pro comfort. I'm pro comfort, and anything that's because it kind of reminds me of the whole mortgage crisis where the rates were super high, like super high, right? 5%, 6%. Everyone's saying, should I buy a house now? Should I get a mortgage now? Should I do this now? And ultimately, it's like if you can, like, regardless of what the rate you're getting, if you can afford it comfortably and it's a wise decision, get the rate that you want because you don't know what's going to happen, right? Kind of related to that, right? People are like, oh, your rate's too high. Oh boy, is it your money? Hey, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a personal conviction, but of course there's a wisdom behind it. So yeah, that's I think the issue is people getting financed on cars that they can't afford ultimately, I think. But yeah, I agree, Bill.
There's a question. Unless does anybody else have anything to contribute to the car conversation?
Hey, yeah, you can stay on this. You might want to move.
I'm fighting your corner, bro. You deserve a nice car. Don't worry. I'm joking. But Lola had a question that is there any benefit to getting a better credit card, example, or an Amex after building your credit score with a beginner card? If you're paying in full every month, surely there's no difference, excluding specific perks. I don't know if you want to add any more to that, Lola. But yeah, that was her question. Did you get that? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I didn't actually show this slide here, which is like my debt stack. Can you imagine debt stack? But so Lola, to your point, I fundamentally agree. When I didn't have any form of credit, I took out a Halifax card with 0% interest just to kind of start to build my credit because I know like Amex was a lot more stricter when it came to their policies and how they accept people. So I started off with a very basic credit card where there's no perks, there's no rewards. And then a couple of years later, I did take out an Amex, and then I was like, cool, now I can start to rack up these points. So yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to check that other than the perks of like a BA Amex, if you're paying in full, the lower interest isn't going to help you with anything. So
exactly, like interest doesn't act like Amex could be charging me 1,000% interest. As long as you pay your balance in full, you won't be charged the interest.
yeah, exactly. Thank you.
No, good. Should you? Oh,
It said, should you be paying tithes if you've got debt accruing interest? Huh?
Now, why is that the question you put in the chat? Huh? Why is that the question you put? Hey, PA, over to you.
Hello, well, you know, I've read the question and then I'm being a typical preacher. I'm like, well, if you're tithing, should you really be having debt that's accruing interest in the first place? But I'm just being cheeky saying that. But I'm just gonna, because of tithing, because it's not a law, and we tithe by faith. this is where your belief behind what you're doing comes into play. So, for instance, now we tithe on the basis that we believe that the money is not even ours in the first place, and we're doing this in a way to honor God with our income. So the reality is, I tithe because I want to honor God with my income. And I believe that when I tithe, I'm also inviting God to partner with me with my income to bless it and all that good stuff and make it multiply. So the question here ain't about so much should you be paying your tithes, more about I would query this individual about their money management and even how and why they got into a debt accruing interest. I'll start there. Then from there, once we establish what's happening, we'll discuss how do we involve God in helping them get out of debt, which may include me counseling them in the area of how are they honoring God with their money right now? Because clearly, for them to be in debt accruing interest, I doubt they've been, and I say this loosely, they've been honoring finance or student finance the way that they should be to be in that position in the first place. So that'd be my long short answer. It's quite harsh, but most of you guys in church that have had money issues, you know, I'm quite shrewd with it when I give my answers to it. And for some people, when they started tithing properly again, their debt issue got sorted out. So I don't know, it's two and Tisha, but yeah, that's my short answer, guys. So yeah, but very good question though, so yeah, I don't know if that suffice enough. If it didn't suffice, feel free to do a follow up again and slide there. So yeah, but yeah, it's you really got to look at your why behind your tithing, and it has to be by faith and not a law mindset or transaction. If it is the way you tithe and the way you manage your money in relation to your debt accruing interest will shift, in my personal opinion. So yeah, that's my answer.
No, that's kind of reminds me of the scripture that says anything not done from faith is sin, right? It's just an interesting scripture. Kind of
very deep scripture still, actually.
no, listen. I think there was one more question in the chat really quickly. I think someone had how do you balance debts and saving? Yeah, Kemi, sorry, that was the question. What are your thoughts on financing equipments for work, such as laptops, cameras, and work phones? I think it's a really good question. Now, I don't think it's generally. I think it depends, right? Again, on anything that you take out debt, right? There's different types of debt. You can take out debt on an Amex and know that you're going to pay that back in a month's time, and then that's how you pay for your the business expenses that you have. But fundamentally, if it's a business, the stuff that you buy, you can just expense it anyway as part of your business, right? But yeah, I think it just depends on the type of how the debt that you get, when you're going to pay it back. But I mean, hey, it's an investment, no? The way I see it, it's an investment, right?
Can I add to that as well? I think when it comes to financing, guys, the plus or the advantage of financing has to be what am I gaining from this finance? Has to be investment orientated. It's wrong to finance something that isn't bringing you anything in, guys. That's not the goal of credit, and the goal of all these things is to help you use things that should enable you to benefit from it over a period of time. So I think when we ask questions behind financing stuff, the question really is what you're financing, what is it benefiting, or what is it adding, what is it actually increasing in value in your life. So for your circumstance, Kemi, financing equipment for, let's say, camera, laptop, that you're director, editor, you run a business. Essentially, you don't have 10K sitting around to go and buy all that stuff. So your only goal to be able to execute what you're doing now, that's making you income. It's financing thing. You know, I had friends now back in the day when we started in photography. Most of us saved that money from our shoots to buy equipment. One of my friends, literally, or a few of them now, actually, to tell the truth, they sold all their equipment and only rent out equipment based on shoots now. That's because after a while, having all that equipment, I'm not being able to have access to a lot more because of that the cash flow was just hindering them. So part of their scheme when they were doing hiring clients was that, look, a portion of what I'm going to be charging is going to go towards rental equipment for work. They were still making money from business deals, but they're not having to worry about all these equipments and quote unquote liabilities here, all this stuff here. So I think it all goes back to how you're financing something to reinvest back into yourselves, whether it's a good deal or not. It's bad if it's just for leisure. It's good if it's building new assets. I hope that makes sense. What I'm saying. That goes for anything, guys, that you guys are doing. So yeah.
That's dope. Yeah, like I said, guys, my business, the company, they have 500 million in debt, and they're still doing okay. So they're still paying my salary, so it is well. Cool. I think there's 2 more questions because guys, we'll be here until 10:30, 11. I don't mind, but I know I get a red card. So there was one from. All right. Do you know what? All right, it's a good question. It's not good to cancel a credit card if so I'm no longer using the card. What's the best way to get rid of it? Now you're asking the wrong person. Tony will tell you I don't cancel any card. I don't cancel anything. Guys, I have about 15 no stretch. I have about 10 different debit cards, no debit accounts. Because eventually when I'm wealthy, I need to spread it, right? Get the 85K allowance. But ultimately, like, yes, if you cancel it, yes, they do say, oh, this person maybe doesn't use credit well and it doesn't negatively affect it. But I think I don't think it's that deep. But if it's like, I personally would just keep it because it's that holy. Doesn't stop it. But yeah, I think if there's no harm for you, Sha, why not keep it? But if you really don't want it, yes, it'll probably affect it slightly, but I don't think it's going to be the end of the world ultimately. But I like to spread my bets. Have a bit of leverage if I need. But personally,
Iman asks, how do you balance?
Yeah, that's the last one.
Saving?
How do you balance paying your debts and saving? So, to be fair, thank God, like the only thing that we need to pay in debt wise, the thing is our mortgage, and that's like, just that one's fundamental, right? I think if we when we did have, I guess debt, before I guess it was so our order of importance. This is us personally was making sure that there was always at least some sort of an emergency fund, like at least I know in the last session I said like 3 to 6 months, but even if there was like £1,000 just in case anything was like, that's like the fundamental. And then because one thing you have to realize is that paying off debt is a form of investment, like whether you like it or not, right? And it's a form of investment because the investment you're making is the interest you're not paying. So if you have a debt that's 10%, that's charging you 10% every single month, and you want to save money, cool. Try and have that emergency fund. But then that debt is, if it's bad debt and it's costing you quite a bit, that's probably going to be the most important thing. Now, again, I don't want to say you should do this because I'm not an expert and I'm not an advisor, but if I was in that position, I'd probably focus on that, provided that the emergency fund was in some level of a decent place, because that is also an investment, ultimately.
That's so good. That's good. That's good. Is that good enough answer for you, Iman? Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Awesome. Any more questions, guys? This is your
You've started.
I'm just letting people, because if not, they'll DM you on Slack or WhatsApp to you afterwards. Let the man go to sleep. Any more questions?
I've got one, if that's okay.
What's there?
What's it called? When making decisions about long-term debt, so like a mortgage, for example, if when you first get the mortgage out, like it's affordable, say for example, like, you've gone to your mortgage advisor, they've given you the advice, you've gone for your mortgage, and then something like dramatically happens, what is the wisest decision to make when taking out that long-term debt that covers you in that case. So say, for example, if you're married and one of you loses and you lose that second income, or if you have a business and you lose that, like what's it called? That, I forgot the name of it, but that third like income stream, how do you, like, you can't preempt these things, but how can you be wise about taking long-term debt, thinking about, you know, how precarious things can be sometimes?
No, that's such a good question, because I feel like we've kind of been in that situation, and I think the fundamental thing is being, before you've taken out that debt, being like incredibly strict about the parameters of the debt. And I don't mean using what the government says, because the government says, hey, you can take out debt 4 to 5 times your salary, or hey, you can do all these crazy things as the bare minimum, because if that was right, the UK would be such a prosperous and thriving economy, right? What I would say is, so when we took out our debt, we were very strict, and we said that we want to take out enough debt to buy this house that we can cover it on one person's salary. That was our like bare minimum, because what that does is that it gives you enough leverage if something was to happen, right? So we said, cool, like regardless of who, no, we actually said to cover it on the lower salary, like one salary, just so that that was even like an extra barrier that we put. Like, it's not the higher salary, it's the minimum amount that you think that you can pay back. If you can pay that back, then fine, cool. That was our thing. Lo and behold, what happened? My wife said, babe, I'm going to be a business owner. I was like, fantastic. I support you on that 100%. And we're going to build this business, and then you're going to retire me, right? But that happened. And then what happened? We had one person's salary, right? You guys know this stuff, right? I'm not sharing anything that I haven't shared, but fundamentally, that's what happened, right? And that's because we were very strict about not saying, oh, if we use 2 person salary, oh, we can get this fantastic 800K house in the middle of London and be very, very, no, because that's dumb, right? So yeah, I would say if you're not sure, probably vet it, and if you're comfortable with the person, vet it with someone who's very, very vigorous in terms of like the numbers, and say, no, Hillary, this is what the government website says, fine, but that's not what you're going to do, because you don't know what's going to happen. That's my advice, and that's what we've done personally.
That's actually dope, you know. I think we just said this give me ideas to Damola still. So yeah, that was really good. That was really good, man. But guys, let's give Damola a round of applause. This has been a really good conversation. In my personal opinion, I feel like we need to do another discussion on debt and credit. I'm sure there's more that people want to talk about. But this has been an excellent 3 weeks. So next week, guys, is the practical. Next week, we're going to practically go through stuff we discussed. And like I said last week, guys, you're wasting your time and you're being very silly if you're not going to even attempt to try anything you've learned over these last few weeks. So like I said last week, even if you just used £1 to open Vanguard or just to do one small free trade, let's apply. The greatest thing you're going to do here is just by learning is applying what's been said. So I encourage you, you know, this is not financial advice, but I encourage you, if we're going to grow, let's apply to this stuff. It's been so amazing. Honestly, man, even today's conversation has got me thinking a lot about how I'm using my debt and everything else. So I just want to encourage you guys, feel free to message him for more info, but please do apply what you've heard. But next week is the last week. There'll be some nice things in store for us. So I encourage you all to be there. And I look forward to hearing wonderful testimony this year of A&T and our friends as well, prospering in Jesus' holy name. Amen and amen. See y'all.
Sorry, guys. Really quickly, I was being accused of not sharing what I wanted to share. Really quickly, it's going to be like 30 seconds. So if you do have an Amex, right? If you do shop with your Amex online, this is always shop through this website called BAE Store. What they will do is, so normally you get you get an ABS per coin for any transaction that you make. But if you go through, for example, you jet setters that you like to fly out, go on booking.com and you can spend £500, £600 on a hotel. Amex will give you 3K points without you doing anything, because it's 500. It's £1 per six ABS, right? Like you go anywhere, you go to Nike, you go to ASOS, right? Like, guys, this is free money. Like, if you're doing your house and you go to B&Q and you spend £1,000, bruh. So this is the extra thing that I wanted to share.
This
Yeah,
is weird, yeah.
Jeremy, sorry guys. Jeremy put in a very, very good TV rec in the chat. Check it out. But yeah, BAE store guys. I'm sorry, but I'm out, guys. Love you guys. Thank you.